Organizations, they don't want to use MediaWiki's built-in system. They want to integrate it with their SSO platform. And thankfully, MediaWiki's auth and session management code do allow for extensions to implement their own auth mechanisms. The current approaches that we have, the primary one is pluggable auth. I like to call it, I like to say that before pluggable auth, we were in the dark ages of SSO, and people were nodding their heads, right? It was really bad. But once pluggable auth came around, it was like a renaissance of SSO for MediaWiki. I know Cindy's going there laughing, but it really was. It can be used for so many SSO protocols, and it's easily adaptable to other SSO protocols as well, which is awesome. So it's a really flexible framework, and it sits on top of Auth and Session Manager and MediaWiki, and it makes the job for all of us other SSO, auth integration extension developers much easier. And I have been on that end of the story as well. Whereas auth remote user, it's usually used in cases where the session management is already being managed by the web server. It's a less common approach, but it requires cooperation with the web server. So usually you have to install something like your IIS or your Apache, some sort of modification. But what's missing from this? What if we want to support IDP-initiated authentication? Because right now, if you go on, like SAML or whatever, and you try to log in from like the IDP's identity provider's portal, it's gonna probably be able to log in, but it'll like have some failure usually. It'll say like fatal error authenticating user, but you'll be logged in still. I don't know, kind of odd. What if we want to avoid using complicated SSO protocols like SAML? Because I guarantee you, if you've worked with SAML before, you pray that the next assignment will probably be like OpenID Connect or something like that. And what if we want to just reuse an existing authentication token that we got beforehand, right? Why do we have to go through the bother of having to do it all over again? I'm going to introduce a concept to you that's not unique to MediaWiki, but is commonly used in the auth world, JWTAuth. It stands for JSON Web Token. Ignore the JSON. I don't think it really applies here. It's you can just think of it as like a token standard. And a token represents a unique auth session.
Identity provider and consumed
by the service provider. In the context of this presentation, I'll just be referring to the session service provider as like MediaWiki, because MediaWiki in this case is our target service provider. Whereas the identity provider is something like, in feed and functions presentation beforehand, like that. So yeah, JWTs are useful for persisting auth sessions throughout the token's life, because that token is like, it's tangible text, and it's literally, you have that, you can use it to assert that you are, you have an authentication session. Whether it's valid or not, who knows, but you are asserting that it is one. You can reuse this token across multiple services, because all you have to do is just store it locally, like in a cache, and then just kind of apply it to whoever website is asking for it. And it avoids you having to authenticate with the IDP multiple times. So this is best for systems where users will be logged into several sites at once, including MediaWiki, and where sites are accessed from a central login system. I want to give an analogy comparing like SAML, OpenID Connect, OAuth, LDAP, etc. These all called the SSO protocols versus JWT. I'm going to try to speed through this as quickly as possible, but just bear with me. Thank you. So an authentication analogy would be like getting pulled over by the police, right? So the Department of Motor Vehicles in this case is the identity provider, because they know who you are. The driver is the user, and law enforcement would be the service provider. And they want, the police want to see who you are. If you're in the case of like an SSO protocol, that's like the police calling the DMV to manually verify whether you are who you claim to be. So that's a really long, drawn-out process. You have to go across multiple people. Whereas if you had a driver license like we all do, which you're supposed to have when you're driving, right? That's like a JWT. That driver license is enough to convey your identity. And unless it's forged, which is a problem, right? But usually it's not forged. The police will say, okay, yeah, this looks like a valid, driver license. Now I trust who you are.
Or suspended. Or suspended.
Or it's suspended, yeah. So in this case, the driver license is like the JSON Web Token. For authorization, it's like permission to go on field trips. So usually, I mean, in the US, right, when we were young and we had to go on field trips, we had to take a form back from school and have mom and dad sign that to let you be able to take back to school and be able to go on that field trip. So if you're using like a traditional SSO protocol that involves all this back and forth with IDPs and SPs, that's like the school like going to actually ask the parents whether the child can go on the field trip. Whereas for JWTs, that field trip permission slip is basically the JWT here, and that's what we use, right? Because it's a lot more convenient. So using JWTs in MediaWiki wasn't really that obvious. I would say not even feasible until now, but we have a new JWTAuth extension that I'm happy to announce. It does not depend on other MediaWiki extensions, so it does not use pluggable auth as a base. And I'm really sorry, Cindy, but there are reasons behind that. It uses Firebase's PHP JWT library, and it uses Session Manager in MediaWiki, but not Auth Manager. Because Auth Manager has this very rigid process that they expect you to adhere to, and it's not very easily compatible with the way that JWT authentication usually works. So what happens is the IDP will directly send a post request containing the JWT to the wiki's special JWT login page. So you probably log in on your IDP, and then it'll redirect you with the token, the JWT token that it made, to this special JWT login page on the wiki. If the JWT is valid, this extension will authenticate you into the wiki, and MediaWiki will then recognize you as authenticated. If the JWT contains authorization info, then we'll also assign the user groups as necessary. But how do we know it's valid? How do we know that that permission slip's not forged? How do we know that that driver license is not forged, right? JWTs need to be signed. So, we can, since we're low on time, I'll just, say that we have different encryption algorithms that you can use, but basically that's how we know that the JWT is not forged.
On the MediaWiki page.
And I will take questions on Hopin in the interest of time, so I'll answer those later. But yeah, just thank you very much, guys, for bearing with me, and I hope if this is helpful. That...
one question. Yeah, you can have some of my time.
Oh, I appreciate it, Daniel. Wow, that's very kind of you. Okay, the next. Let me borrow some of his time. Thank you very much. Any questions then? Cindy?
Do you handle JWTs that are revoked?
Do we handle JWTs that are revoked? So because we use the Firebase JWT library, it includes all that logic already. So wait, no, revoked by the actual system. No, because I think yeah, because it's a one-way street. Yeah.
Which is sort of the analogy of the suspended driver's license, that the police officer will look at your license, and they can see that it was valid when it was issued.
Right.
But
yeah.
they can't see whether it was revoked because you had a DWI
yes.
or other
yes.
reason. And in that case, they would have to still call back and find out if the
yes.
license is still valid.
That is true. That is true. And that's why if we're taking this approach, I know some companies, they have to take this approach, because it's just unfeasible otherwise. But the best way to kind of go around that is to make your sessions as short as possible. So usually like 8 hours for the workday. And then after that, you'd have to re-authenticate.
What if the single sign-on platform was revoked? So
not with the JWT.
That would be the higher level protocol usually.
Yeah, I guess in our case it wouldn't matter because we wouldn't be able to get on the actual platform without being signed on with the valid cert.
Yeah.
So then the valid cert would generate your new JWT, which would reset your data or reset your groups.
And then that JWT would be valid until the
Yep.
next time it's.
Yeah.
So even if it got revoked, I guess I would have to immediately put it revoked to JWT.
Yeah. So that's the only bad part of it is we don't really, have a two-way street here. So it's one-way communication. So yeah. Good life story, right? Like, how do you prevent people forging stuff, and how do you, revoke it remotely? It's hard to do. Yeah. But that's a good point. But yeah, the extension is definitely going to be, oh, that's it. There's more, proposals in the line for how we're going to develop this further.
Yeah, if I understood right, is that to say that the user gets the token and the user provides it to MediaWiki such that MediaWiki never has to interact with the IDP directly?
So the question is, does the SSO system just hand off the token to the user so the user can take it to MediaWiki and MediaWiki doesn't have to interact with the auth system? Sure, yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah, it's like, you know, when I'm going to school and my mom says, hey, it's Teacher Appreciation Week, you should bring this gift card with you to give to your teacher. It's like that. Yeah, I give the gift card, but it's just like in my backpack. You know, I don't do anything special with it. I just carry it on my course to go to school. Same thing here. The user, it's seamless for the user. They just, you know, on their login system, their IDP, they'll just log in and it'll redirect them seamlessly to the JWT login page on MediaWiki, and they'll log them in. Yeah. So yes, there is that JWT that's conveyed through, but it's seamless. They don't even see it. It's a hidden, you know, post HTTP request. Yeah.
So the way the SAML integration that I'm familiar with works is that the user tries to visit the MediaWiki site. The MediaWiki site looks for the SAML response or a secure session that's already in place. And if it's not there, it redirects them to the IDP, establishes the secure session, and then consumes the attributes and lets them in.
Yeah. Yes.
And I guess what I'm struggling with is what you described. They sound like approaches, and I understand there may be some differences. Yeah, you had the process. Not so much the analogy, but if you could go to that process chart that you showed. Yeah, so you three-step process, right? The IDP sends the post request. So that happens. So that's to say the user has to get the token first and then try to go to the application?
Yes. So yeah, they should be initializing their login request from this centralized system itself. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that actually sounds a little bit more complicated than the SAML approach that our organization is currently using. I'm trying to figure out where the trade space is.
I would say it's slightly different, and in some cases, if you're starting from the IDP itself, it's actually easier. You know, there's no like pass back and everything like that. It's just a one-way street. Yeah. Now, Cindy, of course, mentioned the drawback that you can't revoke tokens. Like once they're issued, they're just out, right? It's like US dollars, right? I mean, technically there is a way to revoke the validity of them, but you know, let's say that I go to Jerome Powell's, you know, whatever, he prints off $100 million for me, like he has done in the past few years, and I take that and then I, you know, buy illicit drugs with it. Well, he can't just invalidate those dollar bills, you know, that's they're just out there. That's the drawback, but that's just the way it is, you know. So that's why I prefer to just, you know, say like, yeah, you know, sometimes you need to revoke them, but in that case, keep your sessions short, right? That's the biggest thing. So everything is powerful, right? A knife in the kitchen is dangerous, but only if used in the wrong way. If used the right way, it creates some great food. Yeah. And thank you so much, Daniel, for giving me your time. I'd like to just pass on to him in the interest of his generosity. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.